work tonight?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Pardon me for looking like I should be in bed sleeping because, well, I should be in bed sleeping. All right, let's do this thing.
Pardon me for looking like shoot.
Or you got to make sure you hit pause.
Yeah.
And then pop out the chat.
Well, I'm just doing it on my iPad, so.
Oh, gotcha.
Hopefully that works.
All right. Let me know when you're ready.
As ready as I'm going to be, so go for it.
All right. I'm hot, and it's recording. I can play. Alrighty. Music, noise, recording on all 3 tracks. Say something.
Something. Hello, how are you?
Beautiful. Alrighty then.
Yep.
So I looked. I haven't done a podcast since September 25th.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
And we haven't done one together probably since.
Yeah, who knows?
Before Sun and Fun last year. So here we go.
Yes. Alrighty, here we go.
Wait, James Batch says he hears an echo. I don't know if that's. I don't, but he's saying he's hearing an echo, so I'm not sure if that's. I don't know.
I'm going to roll with it.
Okay, let's go.
All right. Flying Life Podcast, episode 45, recorded on January 14th, 2019. Oops. Let's try this opening music again. Welcome to the Flying Life Podcast, a podcast just about that flying, aviation, and my life. I'm Dispatcher Mike, a dispatcher for a major airline based here in the United States. Joining me on this episode is Dispatcher Greg, another dispatcher for another major airline, also here in the United States. Greg, how are you doing?
Well, good afternoon, Mike. I'm doing okay.
We've
bright and cold and very cold here in Chicago. Snowy.
The 4-letter S word.
Yeah.
Ugh. So
well, I'll tell you, I was out in Atlanta the other day. And it wasn't so warm out there. So, but you
brought your cold weather with you.
Yeah, exactly.
You brought it with you. It was not warm.
Yeah,
it was chilly. But I guess it is winter, so I mean, I guess that's what's supposed to happen. So, Greg, we haven't done a podcast in a really long time. So, how have you been?
Okay. I guess I've been working a lot. And aside from falling a few months ago in the snow here in Chicago with a broken or fractured humerus, I'm doing okay. Shame,
brother. Snow. You know, you could just come down and work for Acme.
Yeah, well, you know, after what I saw the other day, you know.
After seeing the office and hearing about your guys' setup and what you guys do, yeah.
Has me some thoughts.
All right, so in this episode, we're going to talk about a Norwegian plane that's been stuck in Iran, Boeing aircraft deliveries, the government shutdown 3 weeks in, and what's that really doing to the aviation industry, uh, and some other articles that are shutdown related, and then we got some feedback from Brandon. We're going to talk about jump seating and jump seat rides and things about that. And then that'll pretty much wrap up the episode because I'm going to need to take a nap. So before we delay any longer, let's start with the news. From the USA Today, it wasn't today's USA Today, but it was on the 10th, an article that says a Norwegian Air 737 has been stuck in Iran for 4 weeks, or almost a month. This happened when a Norwegian air jet diverted to Shiraz, Iran, because of a technical issue with one of its engines. The flight was going from Dubai to Oslo when the incident occurred and diverted to Shiraz. As we know, when you lose an engine, that's a nearest suitable airport. And when you're over a country, and well, it doesn't matter if it's land and there's an airport, nearest suitable doesn't really get into political boundaries. But because of this and the U.S. sanctions on Tehran because of its nuclear program, it blocks civilian aircraft sales and restricts service and replacement parts from getting there. So they have an airplane that's there and it cannot get fixed in Iran. Now, if they would have diverted to another country, that airplane would be no big deal for them. So to me, it really makes you wonder and makes you think of how they're actually going to get their aircraft out of Iran. Greg, does Acme Blue fly over Iran?
We try to avoid it. Actually, we have certain countries that we are prohibited from flying over. And while I don't have the list here in front of me, I do know Iraq, Iran, I believe it's Iran is prohibited from flying over there. Certain parts of Crimea and certain parts of Russia. Yeah, we don't fly over those because, for political reasons, of course, but also if, something happens and you need to land an airplane, you probably don't want to be going anywhere near there.
Right. Now, we'll have this a link to this in the show notes, but the FAA actually has prohibits overflight of some countries. There's restrictions and there's different notices for many different countries, Afghanistan, Burma, heck, even
Yes.
Canada. There's a FAR for flights in between Canada and the United States. Cuba, Egypt, which is part of the Sinai Peninsula, is all has a advisory or a NOTAM. So there is a NOTAM out for the United States of America advisory for Tehran Flight Information Region. So there is a NOTAM. The link will be in the show notes, but it basically says that U.S. air carriers, any person described in paragraph, it's all legal speak, it's the FAA, any person described in paragraph A planning to operate into, out of, or within or over the Tehran FIR should file a flight plan well in advance and carefully adhere to that flight plan unless otherwise directed by air traffic control. Any person in paragraph A making an unanticipated landing in Iran should contact the foreign interest section at the Swiss embassy in Tehran for any assistance needed. And the United States goes on and says they don't have a embassy in Tehran. So if we divert there, you got to call the Swiss for help. So thankfully there's the Swiss, but it's not the United States does not prevent its air carriers from operating into or out of or over the Tehran Flight Information Region, FIR. Now at Acme, we do have kind of the same, and there are prohibited areas that we cannot fly to over. Iraq, Iran, Syria is part of them. There is a prohibition from the United States from flying over, I believe, Somalia and the Crimea, the Crimea, in that peninsula. So, and Syria as well. So we're also not allowed to fly in the Damascus FIR. So we used to have Afghanistan blocked, but when I was doing some research for the show, I've noticed that Afghanistan is back to be flown over, which I find to be very convenient. The fact that Acme is going to be starting service again to India, and if we had all of those different routes turned off, then how are we going to get to India?
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, we have our flights out of India, and we do obviously fly over Afghani airspace. And it says in our flight operations manual, basically, you do not divert anywhere in Afghanistan unless continued flight. Continued flight is not an option. Right. So, yeah, you don't obviously want to have to go anywhere near there. So I'm looking at our operations manual with Iran, and basically if we route over Iran, flights will be in Iranian airspace for less than 2 hours, and landing in Iran should only be contemplated in the event of serious mechanical emergencies. Contact dispatch before diverting. So obviously we don't want to be going any there. If we do have to divert, flying time to either Kuwait, Dubai, or Mary would be the best suitable places to go. But yeah, I mean, basically, the only time you're going there is if you're on fire, not if there's an engine lost. Even though there may be technically suitable airports, so to speak, it would not be wise, in the opinion of the captain and dispatcher, to have to divert to one of those airports.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, it's we used to fly over Iran. I used to bomb flights over Iran all the time, and by bomb flights over Iran, I mean flight plan and file them over Iran. I didn't bomb anything or bomb any flights. But yeah, I used to send them over Iran all the time, and a lot of our Dubai to Atlanta flight, a lot of times in the wintertime, going up north over Iran was the very more economical than flying over Iraq. But after Malaysia 46 got shot down, that incident really changed a lot of how we operated as an air carrier. And for the longest time, before we canceled our Dubai route, they were flying over Egypt and Saudi Arabia to get to Dubai, which was literally flying 2,500 miles out of the way, opposed to flying north in a more economical fashion.
Yep. Well, the other issue, and you brought up the issue out of India going out to the States. You got some high terrain out there. You start flying out of India, going up through Afghanistan and all that. There's those, it's imperative that you're filing your flights on those terrain critical routes. Not to get too much into the weeds on this, but for people that don't know, if you were to lose an engine, you're flying out over, I forget what mountain, is it the Himalayas? You're flying out over the Himalayas, you lose an engine. Well, that terrain can be higher than your drift down altitude, depending upon where you are. So those terrain critical routes are required, and those fly over those less desired countries.
Yep.
So that's a double-edged sword, or another consideration you have to think about when over those places.
Yeah, because anytime you lose an engine, you can't hold your altitude. especially if you're up in the higher flight levels. You just don't have enough thrust, so you're gonna come down. Another thing is also if you decompress, you have to get down to 10,000 feet, and if the tops of the rocks are at 20,000 feet, it's kind of hard to descend when there's the granite clouds in the way.
Yeah, yeah.
So then we'll have escape routes and things like that, where the crews will have to fly it at Acme. They're actually boxes, and the boxes are numbered in lettered, like for South America, it might be S14. And 14 is the height that you can go down to safely. So when you decompress, you go down, you start your descent to 14,000 feet, and then you just fly out of the box. And this box is something that the pilots have to put in as a secondary flight plan in their FMC, and it's actually displayed on their nav display, which is a lot better than how we used to do it. I really like this new terrain box concept. It's a lot better than what we used to do.
Yeah, we don't have that at Acme Blue. I mean, we have that philosophy. We just don't have.
Do you guys have, like, if you're on this airway between here and here, you need to fly this direction? And
yeah,
okay,
yeah, it's in our flight manuals, and our flight planning system also takes that into consideration when you're planning them. It'll have escape routes and all that kind of on their flight plan.
Now, when you're planning your escape routes in your flight planning system, do you have to name the alternates, or does it automatically get named?
It will, by default, pick airports that are, quote, adequate, but may not be suitable, so to speak. So you kind of have to go in there and massage those airports.
And make sure that they're open and the weather's good.
Exactly. It will. Our system technically does look and read some of the NOTAMs to make sure that, hey, the airport is open, but it doesn't always take into consideration the weather, and it doesn't take into consideration approach procedures. So technically, you may have an airport listed, but the winds are not favorable for the runway, or you might have a runway closed and it's just going to pick it. So you kind of have to, you can't trust it fully. You have to go in there and look at it.
Yeah, that's why at Acme, you have to actually go in there, and those terrain, if you're going through an area with high terrain, you actually have to go in there and type in the airport you're going to use. So it covers the flight's tail, it covers the dispatcher's tail, so that you don't accidentally use an airport that's closed.
One of the big things out of India is Kabul. That is our big airport that if we need to use an engine or drift down, we name that as our adequate airport. And if that airport is closed, then we need to find something else. But 99% of the time, Kabul is available. Not that you want to go there, but you have to name it for legality purposes, obviously. So,
as I always say, in traveling, people live there, airlines operate there. It's an airport. The State Department might not exactly be happy, but I'd go there.
If you have to go there, you go there.
Yep.
If you're
you're on fire,
you're going there.
You got to go somewhere.
Well, it's
all
a
right,
long
let's
runway.
go and move on to
yeah.
Move on to our next story, and that is about 2018 aircraft deliveries. This AvWeb article says that Boeing set a new company record for annual deliveries with 806 total aircraft delivered in 2018. That's a massive number.
Yeah.
And of that, the 737s were its biggest one, and making 580 737s were delivered in 2018, which to me is just boggles my mind. And they've gotten their production up on the 737s to producing as many as 52 aircraft a month. That is just cranking out airplanes, which is absolutely insane.
Go Boeing.
Yes, and now on the flip side, just so we don't have any favorites, the Airbus delivers 800 total aircraft, which is 11% higher than 2017. There were deliveries, 20 A220s, 626 of the A320 families, 49 of the 330s, 93 A350s, and 12 A380s is how they broke down. So it's you know, it's still 626 A320s and 500 and some 580 737s. It's a lot of airplanes. It's a lot of narrow bodies. It's a lot of airplanes that's going to need pilots to fly them
Yeah.
and dispatchers to dispatch them. And you tell the economy is good when airplanes and airlines are buying airplanes. So that's a good thing there.
I'm not sure. So with Acme, do you have the new Max airplanes?
We
With
do
the
not have
we do not have them.
any 737 Maxes or A320 Neos. I believe we have some A320 Neos on order, and they start getting delivered in 2020, I believe.
Okay. Yep.
But we are still taking deliveries of 737-900s, and we're taking those deliveries quite regularly.
So I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'm just kind of rambling these off the top of my head, so don't hold me to this. But the 737 Maxes, I believe, Acme Blue has about 100 Maxes that are supposed to be delivered over the next couple of years. And then, of course, we got the 787, the 10s that are just starting to roll out, which those actually look very nice. I haven't had the pleasure of flying them, but we're getting quite a few of those. So, yeah, we'll keep moving airplanes, get new ones, and hopefully going to phase out the 57s and 67s at some point, because those things are just fuel hogs.
We still have our fleet of 7.6s and nothing to replace them yet on the books. So who knows?
Yeah,
we keep flying our airplanes for
Yeah, the Maxes are very efficient. I mean, we get good payload out of those things, good fuel. But yeah, whenever I see a 57, I'm like, gets a little hairy, especially on the Atlantic markets.
I still love the 7.5. The 7.5 is, to me, is the most versatile airplane there is, and I absolutely it's a airplane that can take you out of Eagle and out of Midway and go far out of those. It's an airplane that we fly DCA to LAX with them on a 7.5. So there's a short runway going transcon with a 7.5, but also they can go transoceanic. They can go intercontinental.
Painfully though. Very painfully.
But
in the summertime, Zurich, this is my favorite one. Zurich, Newark, in the summer, when it's not even that warm out of there, try getting a full aircraft out of there, and it just doesn't happen. It's, and that's just one city. We have quite a few of them who are restricting payload. They can't do it.
Yeah, we had one. We had Paris to Raleigh-Durham was our longest, and if you needed an alternate, you weren't going to take everybody, or you needed to stop. And but they've upgraded that flight to a 7.6 now, so we don't have that worries anymore.
Well, that's a little bit better,
Yeah, and most of the places where we fly transoceanic with our 7.5s are the shorter lengths, the JFKs to JFK Dakar, Shannon, Dublin, kind of the short transoceanic hops, opposed to the really stretching the rubber band on it. I mean, I swear that marketing has a string and a map, and it's got some flex in it, and you always try to take it to the limit, and it's our job to make sure it works.
I tell you how they do it. They go on Google Maps, Boston, San Francisco. Here you go, 2,000 miles. 57 can do it, no problem. What's the issue?
Right. Well, it says this is what it says. The ranges of the airplane. It's in the range. Why can't you guys make it work?
Right. It doesn't matter. So anyway. I digress.
Next article comes from the Airline Geeks, and this is a very well written article. And this we're going to dip our toe into the political realm. We're not going to talk about the politics behind what's going on, but we're going to talk about how it's affecting the aviation industry. And this 3 weeks in, how the longest U.S. government shutdown is affecting the airline industry. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I'll kind of go through and read the basically what's going on. First of all, TSA lines are now, especially today, here in Atlanta, TSA lines were over an hour due to staffing as federal employees weren't coming into work. In Houston and some other airports, they've actually closed down some TSA checkpoints because they didn't have the staffing to operate them and all that. So first thing is new aircraft. American Airlines, in a statement, confirmed that the carrier is taking delivery of 2 737 MAX 8 aircraft since the shutdown, and both planes, however, have yet to enter commercial service as they await the required FAA approvals from their inspectors, who are currently furloughed. Now, Acme, we also have 2 737-900 aircraft that we're supposed to be flying for us already, and they are not, because we're waiting for our primary our POI to come back and sign the op specs. Honestly, all we are waiting for is a signature to fly these aircraft, and we can't do it until we get the signature that we can fly them. Silver Airways, a Fort Lauderdale company, has multiple ATR turboprops that cannot take off with passengers until their POI puts it on their op specs. Cape Air is in the same thing. And then this company called Delta Airlines, while it still continues to take delivery of its new A220s, it says in here that their scheduled launch entering a service might be delayed because the FAA hasn't done any of its proving runs with them yet. So until those airplanes can be put on the op specs and get the actual proving runs finished, they actually might have to go and change their schedule. In a statement in this article, it says Delta continues to monitor the situation and work with the FAA to ensure that the A220 is fully certified when it enters our fleet. No customer disruption or impact to schedules are expected. I'm not sure how Delta can say that because, well, it's not like poof, the shutdown will end anytime soon. So TSA and ATC are both agencies where people have to go to work even though they are not getting paid. The first concrete examples of the shutdown effects was seen in Miami, where Terminal G was planned to be closed from early January 12th through 14th because of a shortage of TSA screeners. Now, in Miami, I'm not sure I'm that very familiar from the airport. I don't know if that's actually turning off and shutting down the terminal and not using those gates at all, or just shutting off the TSA checkpoint that is in front of that terminal. I don't know in Miami if you can go terminal to terminal, but that'd be a big kick in airline operations if you just shut off a whole terminal and you have normal gates and flights going in those gates. Now you're making yourself a gate constrained airport where
Yeah.
you can have holdouts and all of that.
I could say I'll give you a personal experience from yesterday, because this weekend I flew out of O'Hare to Atlanta and back, and the lines were, as you said, they're pretty long. I have TSA pre-check, so the lines were actually pretty quick. I found most of the TSA people actually, despite them not getting paid and despite everything else, still being professional, doing the best they can under the circumstances, maybe a little bit more, I don't know, impatient with certain people. But overall, I felt it to be pretty smooth. But this is going to, this thing continues to drag on. it's going to get pretty ugly pretty quick with these TSA people because let's be honest, they're not paid nearly as much as they should be for what they do. And a lot of these guys, they work paycheck to paycheck. And, at some point, there's a tripping point where, okay, I got to quit my job or I got to do something to start providing because I can't continue to come into work and not get paid every day. So, if this thing continues to drag on, I would expect significant delays at the airports, and the air traffic controllers. I mean, these guys come to work, battle it out every day, dealing with, and they're doing it, with a smile on their face. From what I hear on ATC, and I deal with them in dispatching, they're being professional. But as this thing continues to drag on, we're going to see some issues.
Yeah, I think we will, and especially if it goes, they've all missed one paycheck now, especially if you have these people that are now missing 2-3 paychecks hopefully people have savings, but national averages and shows that people don't have savings saved up.
You're right. So. And then the other issue, we were talking about new aircraft deliveries and getting those certified by the FAA. Acme Globe has, some of the new 787-10s that were supposed to be signed off. And now because of this, we can't do our ETOPS proof runs on those things. And so they're just sitting in hangars waiting for the government to come back so that they can test these things out, which is lost revenue to the airlines, of course, because they have these things scheduled to be flown at a certain date,
Yeah, so. Like I know there's we have backup plans in place to in case we don't get the aircraft, as we have them scheduled, and it's gonna hurt other aspects of the operation if you have to sub a spare that's normally for one fleet to fly another fleet that you can't go and fly. Well, now you're taking a spare away, and operational spares are needed because airplanes break.
Yeah.
So the next article we have in here is pizzas across the border for controllers, and this is really cool for the controllers up there in Canada. So in solidarity with their unpaid counterparts, Canadian air traffic controllers ordered pizzas for their FAA facilities across the border. So basically, if the facility is buying pizza for the facilities that they normally work with. So, for example, in Vancouver was buying pizza for Seattle Center, which is kind of cool, and it kind of goes through all along. But here's a bunch of controllers up there. They talk to these U.S. controllers all the time for handoffs and all that in between their sectors, and they have gone and raised money, and everyone in Canada has chipped. All the controllers in Canada have chipped in some cash, and then they've, as a group, have bought the controllers a lunch, which it goes a long way.
Oh, absolutely. Somewhat of an increase in morale. And hey, they don't have the money right now to be going and buying food, so anything you can get,
Yeah, it
is. It's a very nice gesture.
Yeah, and so that's pretty much covered up. That's what's going on currently in the United States with the government shutdown. Hopefully, our elected leaders will choose to do their job soon and get the country back up and running and people back to work. I think you put this article in here, so why don't you take this one?
Yeah, so let me pull it up here. It's in the show notes. It's from Yahoo News. Kind of a somber one, but so basically, fatal air crashes and deaths from air travel up in 2018, according to the Some Watchdog report. I'll just read briefly the highlights of it. Total 556 people died in 15 plane crashes in 2018, significantly more than the previous year. They say 2017 was the safest year in aviation, with only 44 people died. But if you look at the numbers, 556 people. But how many, we had two or three pretty big ones. You had the Lion Air, obviously, that happened back in 2018 with I forget where that was out of. Do you remember where the Lion Air was?
Oh, that was out of Jakarta.
Jakarta,
It
right.
crashed off of Indonesia with 189 on board.
Yeah.
That was the biggest single loss of life. But then you had an airplane that went down in Cuba,
Yeah, I
killing
was just going to say 112 out of there. So yeah, I mean that's 300 out of the people. So obviously a downward trend. Hopefully 2019 is a safer year for air travel. Luckily, our United States, all our carriers, don't think there were any incidents on any of the majors at all in 2018. So that's always a good sign. That shows that our FAA is doing a good job with keeping up with inspections and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's got to the point where you look at the number of flights, and yes, there were 15 plane crashes, but there were how many flights daily, how many enplanements, how many passengers flown, and when you look at it, it is still that flying is absolutely statistically the safest mode of travel.
Absolutely. You're more likely to get killed driving to the airport in a car crash than you are on the plane.
Yep. At least that's what they say.
Absolutely. So.
Alrighty. Moving on in the notes.
That's
going to wrap up for the news.
Eat the airport page. You had something on there about that?
Oh yeah, there's where did that go? So there's news. It's kind of this is really cool. Our friends over at the Airplane Geeks have set this up and done this. This is a page that they have. It's a map. It's Eat at the Airport, and it's really. I just want to mention it and bring it in because I'm going to start using it. But what this is a movement, I guess you would say, about eating at your local airports and supporting the establishments there. So they have a map with some pins in it with. And then this is not just a U.S. thing. This is a global thing. There's some airports down in New Zealand, airports in Japan, airports over in Europe. There's looks like a few in Germany and the United Kingdom that are on the map, and then a lot in the United States. And I'm going to use this, especially when I do cross country flying. And by cross country, I mean taking the Musketeer literally multiple states away. Because if you have to stop for fuel, it's always good to stop for food and fuel in one stop and, get it done, get your one stop. You don't have to take an airport car somewhere to go get some food or pack a lunch or anything like that. So it's a really cool site. It is a grassroots effort. There's ways to submit it an airport to the map. So, for example, I'll click on one of these. I'll give Chicago some love. I'll click on this one here. This was the Schaumburg Regional Airport. It's kind of over there where you are. Have you ever been to Pilot Pete's?
Yes, I have.
So
many years ago.
Pilot Pete's is on there. Yep. I've eaten at Pilot Pete's before when I was doing all my flight training at Lewis. So it's on there. Clow International, Rochelle. There's a bunch of Milwaukee people. Anyway, if you fly, or even if you don't fly, check out this page and see what's nearby, because there might be a restaurant nearby at an airport where you get some good food. And in my opinion, in my experience, the food at restaurants that are on the airport is usually pretty dang good food.
Yeah, they do. And not cheap, but good.
Yes.
Yeah. Good. That's a good link.
Yeah, it's great. And I think there are over almost 600 airports, I think, on here.
Good.
So it's really cool. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to hit this button over here. Now, I actually have feedback. This is, I think, the first feedback that we've ever gotten on the podcast, audio feedback. And I feel really bad because Brandon set this a really, really long time ago. And, well, we haven't done any podcasts in a really, really long time. And so here is feedback from our friend podcasting on the plane, Brandon. So let's listen to what he has to say.
Hey, Dispatcher Mike, it's Brandon here from Podcasting on a Plane. So I recently did a flight deck training event, and I'm really excited because obviously because they're fun, but also because it's fun to bring like professional stuff from the airline industry back to general aviation too. And I kind of thought of you because, as a CFI, it's pretty easy for me to pass along to my students the stuff that I learn. And as a controller, it's really, really nice to be able to pass along ATC tidbits to the flight crews. But for you as a dispatcher, what I was wondering about is you guys are allowed to do ride-alongs too, right? Like you get a certain amount of jump seat rides per year. And the first question I had was, how often can you do it? Do you get a certain amount per year, a certain amount of times you have to do it? Or is it a requirement at all or something that you just volunteer for? And I had a question about what did you learn? So when you go on these things, what do you pick up that helps you in your job as a dispatcher? And what do you pick up that affects you as a pilot when you fly with your family? And is there anything that you always like to pass along to the air crews about your side of things as a dispatcher? Anyway, I really like your podcast a lot. I think you and I have a ton in common, actually. And I really appreciate that you share the personal stuff as well as the professional, too. Oh, and as far as Oshkosh 2018 is concerned, and let's just throw 2017 in there, too, I don't think even the professional news outlets covered Oshkosh as thoroughly as you did these last couple. So hats off, man. You're quite the journalist, too. Anyway, can't wait to hear back about it, and take care. Till next time, good day.
So, Greg, to answer Brandon's first question, yes, we get to jump seat.
Yes.
No, there's no limits on the number we can take. We can jump seat on any flight we pretty much want within our company, or even ride on another carrier on it. Like Greg will talk about his story and his experience this weekend of doing that. And generally speaking, the company will pay for 1 a year for you to go, and you have to, it's a requirement. Dispatchers are required to go and sit in the jump seat and watch. So I always say that I had to go to Dubai, and I had to go to London. I had to go to Mumbai. This is what I found. I found jump seat rides to be basically a company paid vacation, and I've gone pretty much everywhere and anywhere in them, and you do learn some things out of it. I remember one of my first route, we call them route quals. I went to Orange County out of Minneapolis on an Airbus, and really going into John Wayne Airport, you really understand why it's critical, and you understand why it's a short runway. You can understand what the weight restrictions are, and you understand, and you can see how that plays out and the numbers that you put down and how it affects that. The favorite thing that I like to do that we can do every 2 years at Acme is not going in a route qual on an airplane actually going somewhere, but for us it's actually just going downstairs into the simulator and watching the pilots earn their paycheck that way. And I enjoy going to the sim for route quals a lot better than I did actually going on that, because more happens. You see more. You get to see the emergency happen. You get to see the V1 cuts. You get to see what it is that the flight crew is doing, and how you can be a help to them, or even just a hindrance. Sometimes you just got to let them be, and they'll talk to you on the ground. Greg, what about you? Favorite route quals? What have you learned from them?
Yeah, so similar with Mike, we're required to do it every year. And I say required, like the quotes. But yeah, the way our Acme Blue does it is domestically, you do 1 year is a 1 day, and then the second year it's a 2 days. So basically anything west of Denver is considered a 2-day route qual. The company pays for your hotel and all that kind of stuff. So it's like a vacation, so to speak. And then internationally, since I'm Atlantic qualified, I can do an Atlantic every other year going out overseas. And let me tell you, international, I've found very beneficial sitting in that jump seat, just seeing how a pilot thinks, especially when it comes to ETOPS. When you're flying out over the middle of the Atlantic, you have to be thinking, okay, what happens right now if I lose an engine? What happens if I cabin depressurization. They actually hand draw out the route on a piece of paper and says, okay, if I'm at this point and I lose an engine, where am I going to go? Where is my ETOPS alternate? So is from a dispatching perspective, it really makes me think about when I'm planning my ETOPS alternates. Okay, is this really a safe place to go if they lose an engine? So I've learned a lot internationally, domestically, like the Orange counties, the San Diegos. One place I'd really like to go, and I'm thinking about doing it next year, is Jackson Hole, Wyoming. That's I say terrible because the airport, it's a pretty lengthy runway, 9,000 feet, I think, is the runway. But if you got any clutter on there, snow, ice, that's a challenging airport to get in and out of.
And it's high terrain.
It's high terrain.
It's high terrain all around the airport, and
yeah,
I'm pretty sure Jackson Hole is one of those where we have engine out missed approach procedures written in, where you have a specific route that the pilots need to fly if they lose an engine and have to go missed.
Yeah. So in the winter it's a very tricky airport, but even in the summer we operate flights into there, and you get temperatures up there when it gets up above, I'd say 20 C or higher, you're really performance limited. So you have to be able to think like a pilot when you're planning these flights. And by doing these jump seat rides, you're really starting to get into the mind of a pilot, and it helps for that aspect. But the other neat thing about jump seating, and it happened this weekend, so my buddy who works for Acme, Mike, I had to go to a dispatch conference out in Atlanta. Well, on my airline, the schedule wasn't so great. The flights weren't so hot from a load perspective. So I called my buddy who works for Acme, and I'm like, hey, Mike, how does your Delta flight look at 9:30 in the morning?
You mean our Acme flight?
Acme flight at 9:30 in the morning. I bet the sister airline to Delta, Acme. And he's like, oh, yeah, there's 36 seats open, and, there's jump seats available. I'm like, okay. So what did I do? I ran over to the Acme gates at O'Hare and ran over there, showed my ID. Can I get on this flight in the jump seat? Absolutely. Got on. And, that's one of the neat things, Now, I didn't actually have to sit in the jump seats because there were seats open in the back. That's one of the nice things. But it was a Mad Dog, and, I had never been in a Mad Dog before.
You've never been blessed by the Mad Dog experience.
The MD-88. So I kind of really wanted to sit in the jump seat. But, I didn't want to ask the captain when there were all those open seats, like, But anyway.
You need to get on one with one of those airline pilot guy ones.
Yeah, maybe one day with Captain Jeff, I can link up, or Captain Dana, and look at their schedules and get to ride with them.
Yeah.
But it was a unique experience sitting in the back of an MD-88, very loud, very, very old school airplane. But so anyway, but back to the jump seating. Yeah, it's definitely a benefit that us as dispatchers get to do. It's a great privilege, and we learn a lot. And I think even our pilots learn a lot from us, because when we're back there sitting with them, they'll ask us questions about dispatching. So why do you plan a flight this way? Or why do you put this amount of fuel on the aircraft? So it's a two-way learning street. And, so from my perspective, I'll explain to them, hey, here's the fuel policies from the company, but here's what I'm thinking when I'm planning a flight. And they're very receptive to our thoughts. So it's a two-way learning thing.
Yes, absolutely. I still think the pilots need to come and sit with us for 5 hours every year, but that's not going to happen anytime soon.
But what Acme Blue does now, this just started probably within the past few years. Whenever they go through captain upgrade training, they're required to come up to our NOC, and they sit with the dispatcher for an hour. They sit with our air traffic, our ATC folks for a little bit, and the ops people, just so that they kind of have an understanding of what each person's roles are. But honestly, sitting with us for it turns out to be like 30 minutes at the end of the day, it really is not enough time for them to really grasp or absorb what we do as dispatchers.
Right.
You know.
To finish Brandon's last question, asking if I've learned anything that I take away going to fly from seeing the 121 experience in that, and I do. It goes down to checklist usage and all that. And it's checklist should be read and be out and have the challenge and the response and doing all that, and always using your checklist because you don't want to forget anything. And I've come to that habit in the airplane when I'm flying. I'm actually reading the checklist out loud opposed to just, flying the airplane. Now, could I fly the airplane without start the airplane without the checklist? Absolutely. But would I probably forget something? Absolutely. Ooh, did I turn the beacon on? Or did I just turn on it? But if you go through and you follow the checklist, it's great. Now, a little point on the clarification what you said. As we're in jump seaters, we are allowed to fly on other airlines, which I think is great. And there's agreements between airlines to allow their pilots, flight attendants, and we get lumped in because we're dispatchers to go through and fly on other airlines. And it's it's standby, you're bottom of the list, and sometimes it comes down to you have to take that seat in front. But I've jump seated on Southwest many of a time to get home because the Acme flights were full. Or are you sitting on, with my my family, the Acme flights are full, but the Southwest flight has a decent amount of seats on it. So we buy a non-revenue Z fare on them, and I buy them their seats, and I just jump seat. So it saves $25 there, which is nice. Yeah. So thanks for the feedback. If anyone else has any feedback, go ahead and send it to contact@flyinlife.com, and we'll talk about it on the show. So thank you so much, Brandon. Yeah. And if you haven't heard Brandon's podcast, Podcasting on the Plains, great. He's an air traffic controller out on the West Coast. He does a great job. Does really interesting interviews and talks about some ATC related things. So you should definitely go and check out Podcasting on the Plane because it's also on my podcast playlists, because in case anyone needs any more aviation podcasts to listen to.
There's quite a few out there.
Great ones. They're all great content.
Yeah.
So I think that's gonna wrap up the show because it's nap time. Nap time for me. So Patreon, we're on Patreon, and you can go to Patreon if you want to help give a couple of bucks, tip in a jar, help offset the cost for producing the podcast, the website hosting, the media site hosting. All of that takes some money. So if you want to head over to Patreon and look us up there, that'd be appreciated. You can find show notes for this episode at flyinlife.com/2019/45. You can find me on Twitter at flyinlife, facebook.com/flyinlife, Flying in Life on Instagram. Now, Greg, what about you? Where can you be found online?
Facebook. Find me at Greg Dubin. Twitter. Still, I'm still on there trying to, again, I think you heard me a year ago trying to change my name, but WXFan1978 at Twitter. That's it for now, pretty much.
Okay, dokie. Also, just a note, we are going to try to be more regular with the podcast. It's kind of the New Year's resolution I have, is to be more regular with the podcast. And now that I got most of my stuff out of a box from moving, I'm going to try to get an episode out on the 15th and the last day of the month. So basically, whenever I get a paycheck from Acme, I'm also going to try to put out a podcast. So the 15th and the last day of the month is what I'm going to shoot for. So this should have hit your podcatchers on Tuesday the 15th, and I'll be editing this up and getting it all packaged and ready for that out tomorrow. To do that. So we're going to try to get regular. If you like the show, feel free to share it with your friends, write a review on iTunes and all that fun stuff. So opening and closing music is from bensound.com, and the bumper music is from purpleplanet.com. You can find the podcast on Stitcher Radio. You can find it in the Google Play Store. We're there now, or pretty much anywhere else you can get your podcast stuff. So that's all I got, Greg. You got anything else?
No, that's it for now. See you guys next time.
All right, you guys. Have a good one. All right, in the can. My wife is attacking me.
Hi, Naomi.
What's up?
That's a completely good text message that I just finished typing, and I don't want to waste my texts. So you can read it.
They're not done yet. Still on that. So I need you to leave in. Okay. My wife sent me a text message, or she didn't hit the send button, but she typed it up. Basically, are you done yet? That's the summary of
All right, we'll get some rest.
Yeah, I'm gonna get some rest. We're gonna get some new shades in the house. It's been a crazy day.
Yeah. All right. Well, don't work too hard tonight.
All right. Thanks everyone who showed up. Good morning, Evan. Sorry you missed the show. It'll be on your podcast player tomorrow.
Watch it on YouTube.
Oh yeah, go back and watch it on YouTube because I mean, there's nothing else to do. I'm glad we finally figured this thing out.
Yeah. Right.
All right, Greg.
All right.
Talk to you later.
Later, man. Bye.
See ya.